Well, you guys asked for it overwhelmingly. You wanted to see the BGs Brainrot video, which I guess I should have expected that. Like, it was absurd. Like, 55% of the vote, and the next place was 19. Yeah, that's quite a very big difference in the poll numbers. But anyway, I kind of regret making this already because I feel like it's just gonna spawn a bunch of controversy. Nothing I've been very afraid of, but I don't know. I still try to keep most of what I say relatively in fairness to everyone, I guess I should say. But yeah, we're talking about BG's Brainrot today, which I'm gonna start right off the bat with saying that I think the correct term for that would be not BG's Brainrot, because I feel like it's too aggressive to people who are, using it. So I like to call it Nuke mentality instead, which I'm not really gonna say Nuke mentality because it's not as fun to say as BG's Brainrot, but I do think that calling people who have, I guess, saying that people have BG's Brainrot is what I should say. I don't think it's very fair to say because everyone looks at this game differently. So I just like to call it Nuke mentality instead, but I'm just probably not going to do that because this is the BG's Brainrot video. That's what everyone knows it as. So that being said, first off, everyone needs to know that I have so many controversial opinions about this game compared to most of the player base. So if you don't like what I have to say, that's probably fair. It's just my perspective on things. Looks different than most people. So that being said, I don't really have many things to basically make disclaimers on before we go in. So we can start right now by defining what Nuke mentality or BG's Brainrot is. And there's no strict definition, obviously, because why would there be? It's frickin' BG's Brainrot. It's just a thing. But what I like to describe it as is when the only thing you care about in a champion is the speed at which they kill a defender. So for example, if Hulkling kills Warlock in 40 seconds, that means Hulkling is very, very good. If Luke Cage kills a generic Mystic, I don't know, Destroyer in 60 seconds, he has to be bad, because 60 seconds is, well, 60 seconds is obviously longer than 40. What I should probably have said was, like, if Vox kills Warlock in 60 seconds, then he's bad. Same defender, different speeds. Immediately it just makes Vox bad because he took longer. That's kind of what this whole thing is, in the, simplest possible form. So, more examples I can provide are Shothra versus Serpent. Shothra is one of the best Serpent counters, in my opinion. Whereas Tigra is one of the faster champions at killing Serpents. There's a big difference because Shothra has counter tools and not as much speed. Tigra has less counter tools but just as much speed, or more speed I should say. And the reason I say that is because Tigra obviously has her neutralized, but one thing she doesn't have is the ability to have like 100% control of the fight, and maybe Serpent's a bit of an extreme because you can almost never have 100% control of Serpent in a fight, but Shothra has like some of the best Serpent control because of her atrophy, and Tigra, if things go wrong, they can go very, very wrong. Trust me, I am a Tigra master. I know from experience that that is something she struggles with a lot sometimes, is full control over the defender. And that's why I think Shothra is probably better at fighting Serpent than Tigra is generally, but because Shothra does it like 20 seconds, 15 seconds slower, she's going to be less popular. That's just how a lot of how BG's Brainrot works. Another example would be Luke versus Kindred and Silk versus Kindred. I think Luke Cage is the best hard counter to Kindred because he just shuts off everything with his concussions, whereas Silk will kill it faster but still has to think about the root, think about the stun immunity, make sure that your evade isn't screwing you over when you're trying to counter Kindred specials. That has happened to me before. Like, her evade makes it harder to counter the SB1. So that's another example of it. But that being said, why do people have BG's Brainrot is what we're going to answer next. I think there's a couple of reasons. The first one being older champion design. About a year ago, I guess I should say most of the characters in 2022 and 2023, a lot of what they were designed to do was just general nuking rather than targeted nuking, I guess you could say. Examples like Hulkling, Silk, Titania, Juggernaut, those are the 4 I like to bring out immediately. Those are 4 champions who just nuke everything rather than are specifically tied to nuking like their class directly or specific defenders directly. That is an older champion design. It's something that the game has shifted away from this year, and because of that shift, it means that a lot of people see their champion not doing as much damage for everything, and then they're just immediately worse. That's one example of how this kind of can work. Another example is not only has champion design shifted, but Battlegrounds itself has shifted, because there used to be a thing where you only cared about speed in BGs realistically. Like, every defender could just get nuked by the most common nukes, and whoever did it faster was just going to win. That is not the case anymore with the introduction of defenders like Bullseye and Serpent and Onslaught. To an extent, I think Onslaught can still be nuked, is still like a defender who just gets nuked a lot. But Bullseye and Serpent are the big ones where you have to have a direct counter to them. You cannot just be a common nuke to get the fight down. Enchantress might also be the case, but a lot of the common nukes are in the Science class, so another little bit of a different example. I think it's just always Bullseye and Serpent that are in this category. Couple of their defenders, you could say like Killmonger is another big one, Korg can be another big one, Atuma can be another big one. That's just kind of how the skill class goes, if I'm being honest. But I feel like that's just a big case in how Battlegrounds has shifted because of the defenders being more counter-based now, to where common nukes aren't always going to be the best option. However, they still can be. Like, you want the fastest champion at countering Serpent. You want the fastest champion at countering Bullseye. So that mentality still does exist in that scenario. It's just a little bit different for champions with less utility, like Juggernaut, for example. He has less utility at countering defenders, but because of how fast he counters fast he kills other champions, he's still going to be highly regarded and stuff. And then the other thing is that people value champs by numbers only in a lot of scenarios. I know many people I talk to just only care about a champion's numbers when they look at like a deep dive or something. Whereas when I watch a deep dive first, I immediately want to see what the character is designed to take, what specific utilities they have against meta defenders, and then check what damage they have. Because I think having a use for a champion is more important than just their generic numbers. Examples of that are like Spiral. Her exact use is at countering Serpent. You look at her utility kit and see how many different ways she counters Serpent. That's what I want to check out before I see how fast she is versus like generic cosmic champions. I want to know how well she does versus the meta threats than her generic speed against like every defender in BGs, right? So, anyway, next I want to mention, where do we see BGs Brainrot? And what I mean by that is like what champions are specifically suffering from this. And I made a list of champions who I think have very good use cases in BGs sometimes, but in a lot of other game modes too, that are just getting shafted because of the fact that they take like 60 seconds to kill the defender. These are champions who I think are very strong. It's just not going to be as commonly ran because of that whole 60-second problem. The champions I picked specifically were Vox, Morbius, Ironheart, Spider-Punk, Negasonic, Shothra, Luke Cage when he got buffed, and Purgatory when she got buffed. Out of the past 12 months, I guess 13 and a little bit beyond with Vox and Morbius, I think these champions have suffered the most, because I think all of those are good characters. It's just no one cares about them because of them taking a little bit longer than some other champions in their class for BGs. Outside of maybe Morbius. Morbius is a bit of a weird case, but there's so many different specifics we can bring up. But the reason I bring up these specific champions is that they have very good use cases. They have a lot of different utilities. Like, look how much utility Ironheart has. She does so many different things. Same thing with Negasonic. She has so many different ways at countering the skill class. She almost hard counters the skill class. Like, specifically on stream, they mentioned like her only things in the skill class that she couldn't really counter well was like Kingpin's Unstoppable and Nick Fury's Second Life. And I think for the most part that's almost 100% true. I think Negasonic just counters so many things in the skill class, but because she's going to take like 60 seconds to kill Bullseye or Atuma, no one's going to care. So, yeah. That's just a big problem. I mean, same with like Luke Cage. His concussions are busted. He shuts down so many different abilities. He takes like 55, 60 seconds versus some defenders, and he's just not good at that point. That's just the mentality that a lot of people have. So, why is BG's Brainrot bad? Why is it bad? This is the reason that you're actually here for the video, probably. I have multiple points that I'm going to address. Whether you agree with them or not, I don't know. But it's just what I came up with and the points that I'm passionate about specifically. The first being, a champion is not only defined by damage. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. A champion's utility is the thing that I want to look at in my character first, because at that point, if they have a strong utility set, then they're going to make it in this game. If they have only damage-tied mechanics, then they're still probably going to be pretty good, but if they want to counter some of the most meta things, in my opinion, they need to have a very strong utility kit rather than just generic damage, because of the way the game is shifting with needing to counter Serpent, Bullseye, and eventually the next meta defender and stuff like that. The second one, which is actually my favorite point on this list, is that a champion is not defined by only BGs. So if you look at every other game mode, there's going to be characters who are strong in that aren't necessarily strong in BGs. If you look at Alliance War, I'll bring back Ironheart, because Ironheart is one of the best tech champions, if not the best tech champion for Alliance War right now. So she can't be a bad character if she is legitimately one of the best choices for that entire game mode. Just because she isn't good in BGs doesn't mean she's a bad character. And another example I'm going to bring up is Northstar. Northstar is a new character who has gotten shafted by like everyone who looks at what he does, because they see, oh, he's not designed for BGs, so he's just a bad character. When in reality, he's very good at what he's meant to do in Everest. Maybe not one of the best long-form characters out there, but I still think he's pretty underrated in that department. Alliance War is one example. General Questing is another example. Some champions are just meant to be good there, and they are good there. Obviously, Alliance War is the one I want to talk about the most, because it is the only other PvP mode, I guess I could say. Everest is another one that's worth mentioning, though, which I did talk about a little bit. So, yeah, if you're good in Alliance War, then you're a good champion. I mean, I guess that scales a little bit with how much you value specific game modes, but just because you're not the fastest character in BGs doesn't mean you're a bad character when there are other game modes that you do shine in. Negasonic, again, in Alliance War is very dominant, just not as dominant in BGs. So, I still think she's pretty good in BGs and undervalued. Anyway, not all champions are owned by everyone is my third point, and this one is very specific to some people who have smaller rosters. When I put out a video on Luke Cage and then I see comments that are just saying, yeah, Silk does it faster, so immediately Luke is not very good at this matchup. I find that to be some of the stupidest points ever brought up, because not only does not everyone have Silk, they might not have their Silk ranked, they might not want to rank their Silk, they just want to see what Luke Cage can do, and not care specifically about what other champions also do. I just want to know if Luke Cage is good and where he is good for. And comparing Luke Cage immediately to another science champion just because of a speed problem, I feel like is really, really messed up. Specifically for characters, for people who might not have the alternatives and just want to see how good this character is at doing something. So, Luke Cage is a big example of that. Vox is another good example of that. When people ask me, how good is Vox? I'm going to talk about Vox's strong suits rather than how he compares to other Cosmics. Because I want them to know how good Vox can be for them, rather than how good Vox can be in comparison to other characters that the person asking me the question might either not have or not want to play, or they just want to play Vox and they want to know what Vox is good for. So I think comparing champions needlessly to other champions in their class has its place, but generally I think it's just not fun and not smart, because if people want to know how good their character is, I'm going to tell them how good I think their character is and what this character is meant to do. So next point is not every champion is designed to crush BGs. Talk about this a little bit in point 2. From when champions are created, they are created with a specific purpose in mind. Going back to like this year's champions, we're gonna talk about Bullseye. Bullseye was designed to primarily be a defender rather than an attacker. So he's not designed to crush BGs on attack. Dust, a little bit of the same as Bullseye. Destroyer was meant to be more of a defender as well, but with some attacking purposes tied to Alliance War. I don't think Destroyer performed very well in that. And I think Destroyer would be my pick for a champion who should have gotten tuned up and just didn't the most. But yeah, those are some examples. Arcade is designed with questing intent at heart, a little bit as defensive as well. Northstar was designed with Everest content at heart. Leader was designed as a direct control champion rather than a damage champion. And then there's some champions released this year designed to crush specific defenders in BGs rather than just being a generic good for many meta matchups in BGs. I think Spiral is like that, designed mainly for Serpents, but I think Spiral can be good for other Cosmics and stuff. Negasonic a little bit for Bullseye. Trying to think of some other examples. I can't really think of a lot off the top of my head right now, but some champions are designed specifically for specific defenders, you know? So moving on to the next point, not every champ is targeted for general nuking. Again, kind of brought this up in the last point. Some of these just kind of flow into each other. It's just like some champs are designed specifically for specific defenders. I kind of talked about that on accident. My last point, and the one I'm definitely quite passionate about, coming from a creator perspective, is that when you focus only on the speed of a champion, you're taking away fun from yourself and others by raising the bar so high. When I see people say, like, oh, the 2020 champs, or 2024 champs are mid because they don't have the damage that the characters in the previous years did. If that's your only reason for calling them mid, I don't really know what to say. Like, so many champions this year have very specific utility kits that are actually being useful in so many game modes. They just might not kill things the fastest, and I think that's a good thing, because of a design space question that maybe hasn't been talked about a lot by people who haven't maybe listened to like DLL or something. But DLL talks about design space all the time. Eventually, there's just going to be a point where you can't have just generic nukers anymore, because then they're always going to be compared to other generic nukers. You have to create a problem, create a Serpent, create a Bullseye, and then create a character designed specifically to counter that problem so that champions aren't getting compared to each other by speed only. I think that's a very strong thing that has been happening this year, and something that people don't like. I know the argument about like creating a character and then selling the solution to that character. I get the argument. I think it's really bad if you really think about it. And I think overall it's a really bad point. I understand that people are pissed off when the character takes a bit of time to acquire, just because you have to wait for them to roll over in the Titan, or you can just buy them for $100 with early access. I understand that, but at the same time, Kabam needs to make money, right? So, this is coming from someone who doesn't spend much on this game. I do get early access bundles sometimes when I see a character I'm really interested in, but I don't spend that much on this game. So I don't get all the new characters. I don't have Spiral. who is directly designed to counter Serpent, and I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with not owning Spiral, even though I think she might be the best Serpent counter in the game. I think that overall, this game is doing really well at creating problems and then making solutions for the problems, because if that wasn't the case, all the champions would blend in with each other, and then what's the point anymore, you know? So, anyway, that's kind of the gist of this video. I don't really have much else to say, but if you have any questions about this, I'd be eager to answer in the comments. Just obviously be civil about it. I have to make that point every time because these topics can be kind of turn-offing. They can be kind of a turn-off to some people. They can just cause aggression. And I'm not trying to accuse anyone for having BGs Brainrot. I'm just explaining why I don't like it. And again, we'll use the term nuke mentality because I think it is a little bit demeaning to people who only care about speed. I think you shouldn't insult them like that. We all have different ways to look at the game, and we all value different things. I value what a character does more than how much damage they do. And that's the gist of the video. So, thank you guys for watching this. I'll see you in the next one.